Hi everybody, welcome to part 3 of chapter 10. So we're going to start right into hematopoiesis. Hematopoiesis is a fancy name for blood cell formation. And so all blood is formed in red bone marrow, and all blood cells are derived from the same common stem cell. The stem cell is a hemocytoblast. Hemocytoblasts then form two types of stem cells, either lymphoid stem cells or myeloid stem cells. Lymphoid stem cells will then eventually become lymphocytes. Myeloid stem cells will eventually form one of the other formed elements. Uh-oh, come on. There we go. So here is your hemocytoblast. And if you need lymphocytes, then the hemocytoblast can differentiate into a lymphoid stem cell, which then can produce one of a number of different lymphocytes. Or you can become a myeloid stem cell, which will produce the other white blood cells, basophils, eosinophils, neutrophils, monocytes, megakaryocytes that produce platelets, or erythrocytes. So we're going to look at blood cell formation of your red blood cells, then white blood cells, and then platelets. So formation of red blood cells occurs daily. We're always producing new red blood cells because red blood cells wear out really fast. They don't have a nucleus. They don't have those organelles to fix themselves. And because of that, they only can survive anywhere from a few days to up to 120 days. That's like the max time that they can survive. When they get damaged enough, they're eventually going to end up being phagocytized in the spleen or liver, and the materials from the red blood cells, the hemoglobin, can be reused to produce new blood cells, and the proteins then can be broken down into amino acids that can be reused to produce new red blood cells as well. So the rate of blood cell production is controlled by a hormone called erythropoietin. Erythropoietin is produced by our kidneys. So in general, kidneys produce the erythropoietin in response to reduced oxygen levels. So remember, red blood cells produce or function in carrying oxygen to our system. Our kidneys constantly filter our blood and get rid of waste products. And so our kidneys can also detect oxygen levels. And when we have low oxygen levels in our blood, the kidneys will release erythropoietin that will then move to the bone marrow and cause red blood cell production. So here's basic homeostasis of blood cells, of red blood cells. If something causes us to lower the amount of blood cells that we have in our system, so it could be we have low oxygen carrying capacity because we don't have enough blood cells, we don't have enough hemoglobin, or maybe we have a really bad illness that's causing us not to be able to take in oxygen effectively. So maybe we're having, maybe we have pneumonia or something. Anything like that is going to stimulate the kidneys to produce erythropoietin. So then the erythropoietin moves into our blood, it moves to our red bone marrow, and immediately erythropoiesis occurs. Erythropoiesis is then the production of your red blood cells. This occurs until we have more red blood cells and more oxygen carrying capacity then, which brings us back to homeostasis. So this is another negative feedback mechanism. So let's look at everything. Something has caused our oxygen carrying ability to decrease. Kidneys secrete erythropoietin. Erythropoietin moves to our bone marrow. The bone marrow, within the bone marrow, our our hemocytoblast is going to differentiate into a myeloid stem cell, which then differentiates into an erythrocyte stem cell and increases production of erythrocytes through erythropoiesis. This brings up the oxygen carrying capacity, and we are back. So for white blood cells and platelets, the type of, or depending on what we need, we're going to have colony stimulating factors that are going to stimulate the production. So if we need more white blood cells, colony stimulating factors are going to stimulate the production of the different white blood cells. We also have interleukins, which are other chemicals produced by some white blood cells that will increase white blood cell formation depending on the type. Thrombopoietin is a hormone that stimulates the production of platelets from megakaryocytes. At this point, you should be able to tell me what is hematopoiesis. Oh, whoa, that was fast, huh? What is a hemocytoblast? What are the two stem cells that form from a hemocytoblast? How long can red blood cells survive? What is erythropoietin and what organ functions in producing it? How are blood oxygen levels associated with erythrocyte production? What stimulates white blood cell production and what stimulates platelet production? In this next section, we're going to talk about hemostasis. Hemostasis is the process of forming a blood clot. So there are 3 steps to the hemostatic mechanism. The first is called a vascular spasm. So in a vascular spasm, the blood vessel itself constricts, decreasing the amount of blood flowing so that we don't lose as much. Then we have platelet plug formation, where the platelets stick to the broken edges of the blood vessel. And eventually we have coagulation, where proteins form, the main protein is fibrin, forms within that platelet plug, forming that blood clot. So the first step is the vascular spasm. Anytime you have damage to your blood vessel, be it external or internal damage that has caused, so if you have damage that started externally and cut the blood vessel, or if you have something internal that causes the blood vessel to get damaged, it's going to cause the smooth muscle around the blood vessel to constrict. Once that happens, you have collagen fibers that are exposed. So there's collagen fibers within areolar connective tissue, and areolar connective tissue underlies all of our epithelium. So we have areolar connective tissue with collagen fibers. When that gets damaged, those collagen fibers are exposed, and platelets start clinging to those collagen fibers. The anchored platelets release chemicals that attract more platelets. So this is a positive feedback mechanism that causes a platelet plug to form. So that's what's happening here. And so we have a lot of little platelets that are coming in, some blood, as well as white blood cell, red blood cells and white blood cells are going to move to this area and get stuck in this plug. The third step is the coagulation. So this is actually the blood clot. So there, when you have tissue damage, you have tissue factor release. When tissue factor is released, it interacts with a protein called, or with a molecule called PF3, and these trigger, these plus calcium triggers a clotting cascade. So the clotting cascade is a cascade event because one molecule is converted to another molecule, which converts another molecule into another molecule, and it just keeps going and going until you produce fibrin. So we start with this molecule called prothrombin activator. It's a protein that converts prothrombin to thrombin. Thrombin then takes fibrinogen and converts it into a molecule called fibrin. Fibrin is what forms the meshwork of a blood clot. And so the blood clot, once it's formed, it takes about an hour to form a good blood clot that will stay in place until the healing has occurred. And so here you see that nice little blood clot. This is going to stay in place until the cells have healed, and then that clot will be broken down. And I just like this picture because it shows, it's so cool. Like you see that blood clot forming right there with all the fibrin. So blood clots usually within a few minutes, but the actual blood clot, the actual proteins and everything get in there, the entire process takes approximately an hour. So you'll stop bleeding, but you won't have a full strong clot until about an hour later, which is one of the reasons why if you ever have damaged a damaged area of the body and you stop putting pressure on it or you start picking at it too soon, it'll start bleeding immediately. So there are some disorders associated with blood clotting. So a thrombus is a clot that occurs in a blood vessel that is unbroken. So this is something that is really dangerous because if you have a blood clot in an area like the lungs, it can cause gas exchange to stop, and it can actually lead to, well, death of an individual. If it happens in the brain, it can lead to severe problems like strokes. So why would a thrombus occur? Typically this occurs when you have a buildup of materials in your blood already. So think about like cholesterol buildup in the blood. That would be an example of why a blood clot might form a thrombus. An embolus is a blood clot that forms or that has formed that breaks away and starts floating through our system. So it can clog different vessels in our cardiovascular system, in our respiratory system, or in our nervous system and can lead to damage and death. Another disorder would be thrombocytopenia. So if you don't have enough platelets, where maybe you're not producing platelets properly, then if you start bleeding, you may not be able to fix that bleeding effectively. And then hemophilia, this is a disorder where you don't have the clotting factors. And again, if you start bleeding, you may not be able to stop bleeding. Nowadays, the damage, like if you have hemophilia, they actually have proteins that are produced that you can use to protect yourself. So like these clotting factors can be just injected into your blood, and then you can clot your blood like normal. All right, I'm going to stop this video and get into the next video with blood groups and blood transfusions, okay? Before I go, because I did this last time I checked, I want to go over the study guide questions. So but at this point, you should be able to tell me what is hemostasis. What are the 3 steps to hemostasis? What is a thrombus? What is an embolus? What is thrombocytopenia? And what is hemophilia? So I'm going to go now and I'll upload this and get the next video going. Bye.